everybody, it is time for our Jane Eyre read-along. Today we are wrapping up chapter 24. Yeah, it was a really long chapter. We read it in 3 parts. This will be the final of 3. And if you remember where we were yesterday, Rochester took Jane and Adele out shopping to Millcote, and Jane was getting uncomfortable because Rochester wants to spend all this money and buy her fancy things and brightly colored dresses, which really isn't Jane's thing. So she's getting a little frustrated, and in this chapter, at the end of this chapter, she kind of makes up for it because she gives Rochester a lot of sass in the conversations they have. So let's get started, and thanks so much for watching today. Glad was I to get him out of the silk warehouse, and then out of a jeweler's shop. The more he bought me, the more my cheek burned with a sense of annoyance and degradation. As we re-entered the carriage, I sat back feverish and fagged. I remembered what, in the hurry of events, dark and bright, I had wholly forgotten. The letter of my uncle, John Eyre, to Mrs. Reed, his intention to adopt me and make me his legatee. It would indeed be a relief, I thought, if I had ever so small an independency. I never can bear being dressed like a doll by Mr. Rochester, or sitting like a second Danae with the golden shower falling daily around me. I will write to Eyre the moment I get home, and tell my Uncle John I am going to be married, and to whom. If I had but a prospect of one day bringing Mr. Rochester an accession of fortune, I could better endure to be kept by him now. And, somewhat relieved by this idea, which I failed not to execute that day, I ventured once more to meet my master's and lover's eye, which most pertinaciously sought mine, though I averted both face and gaze. He smiled, and I thought his smile was such as a sultan might, in a blissful and fond moment, bestow on a slave his gold and gems had enriched. I crushed his hand, which was ever hunting mine, vigorously, and thrust it back to him, red with passionate pressure. "You need not look in that way," I said. "If you do, I'll wear nothing but my old low-wood frocks to the end of this chapter. I'll be married in this lilac gingham. You may make a dressing-gown for yourself out of the pearl-gray silk, and an infinite series of waistcoats out of the black satin." He chuckled. He rubbed his hands. "Oh, it is rich to see and hear her," he exclaimed. "Is she original? Is she piquant? I would not exchange this one little English girl for the Grand Turk's whole seraglio, gazelle eyes, hoary forms and all." The Eastern allusion bit me again. "I'll not stand you an inch instead of a seraglio," I said, "so don't consider me an equivalent for one. If you have a fancy for anything in that line, away with you, sir, to the bazaars of Stamboul without delay, and lay out in extensive slave purchases some of that spare cash you seem at a loss to spend satisfactorily here. And what will you do, Janet, while I am bargaining for so many tons of flesh and such an assortment of black eyes?" "I'll be preparing myself to go out as a missionary to preach, liberty to them that are enslaved, your harem inmates amongst the rest. I'll get admitted there, and I'll stir up mutiny, and you, 3-tailed bashaw as you are, sir, shall in a trice find yourself fettered amongst our hands. Nor will I, for one, consent to cut your bonds till you have signed a charter, the most liberal that despot ever yet conferred." "I would consent to be at your mercy, Jane." "I would have no mercy, Mr. Rochester, if you supplicated for it with an eye like that. While you looked so, I should be certain that whatever charter you might grant under coercion, your first act, when released, would be to violate its conditions." "Why, Jane, what would you have? I fear you will compel me to go through a private marriage ceremony, besides that performed at the altar. You will stipulate, I see, for peculiar terms. What will they be?" "I only want an easy mind, sir, not crushed by crowded obligations. Do you remember what you said of Celine Varens, of the diamonds, the cashmeres you gave her? I will not be your next Celine Varens. I shall continue to act as Adele's governess. By that I shall earn my board and lodging, and £30 a year besides. I'll furnish my own wardrobe out of that money, and you shall give me nothing but, well, but what? Your regard, and if I give you mine in return, the debt will be quit." "Well, for cool native impudence and pure innate pride, you haven't your equal," said he. We were now approaching Thornfield. "Will it please you to dine with me today?" he asked, as we re-entered the gates. "No, thank you, sir." And what for? No, thank you, if one may inquire. I have never dined with you, sir, and I see no reason why I should now, till what? You delight in half-phrases, till I can't help it. Do you suppose I eat like an ogre or a ghoul, that you dread being the companion of my repast? I have formed no supposition on the subject, sir, but I want to go on as usual for another month. You will give up your governessing slavery at once. Indeed, begging your pardon, sir, I shall not. I shall go just on as it with usual. I shall keep out of your way all day, as I have been accustomed to do. You may send for me in the evening, when you feel disposed to see me, and I'll come then, but at no other time. I want a smoke, Jane, or a pinch of snuff, to comfort me under all this. And unfortunately I have neither my cigar case nor my snuff-box. But listen, whisper, it is your time now, little tyrant, but it will be mine presently, and when once I have fairly seized you, to have and to hold, I'll just, figuratively speaking, attach you to a chain like this, touching his watch-guard. Yes, bonny wee thing, I'll wear you in my bosom, lest my jewel I should tine. He said this as he helped me to alight from the carriage, and while he afterwards lifted out Adele, I entered the house and made good my retreat upstairs. He duly summoned me to his presence in the evening. I had prepared an occupation for him, for I was determined not to spend the whole time in a tete-a-tete conversation. I remembered his fine voice. I knew he liked to sing. Good singers usually do. I was no vocalist myself, and in his fastidious judgment no musician either. But I delighted in listening when their performance was good. No sooner had twilight, that hour of romance, began to lower her blue and starry banner over the lattice, than I rose, opened the piano, and entreated for him, for the love of heaven, to sing me a song. He said I was a capricious witch, and that he would rather sing another time, but I averred that no time was like the present. Did I like his voice? He asked. Very much. I was not fond of pampering that susceptible vanity of his, but for once, and for motives of expediency, I would even soothe and stimulate it. Then, Jane, you must play the accompaniment. Very well, sir, I will try. I did try, but was presently swept off the stool and denominated a little bungler, being pushed unceremoniously to one side, which was precisely what I wished. He usurped my place, and proceeded to accompany himself, for he could play as well as sing. I hied me to the window recess, and while I sat there and looked out on the still trees and dim lawn to a sweet air that sung in mellow tones and following strain. So this next section, Rochester is singing, but I'm not going to sing, I'm just going to read it. The truest love that ever heart felt at its kindled core did through each vein and quicken start the tide of being pour. Her coming was my hope each day, her parting was my pain. The chance that did her steps delay was ice in every vein. I dreamed it would be nameless bliss, as I loved to be, and to this object did I press, as blind as eagerly. But wide as pathless was the space that lay our lives between, and dangerous as the foamy race of ocean surges green, and haunted as a robber path through wilderness or wood, for might and right and woe and wrath between our spirits stood. I dangers dared, I hindrance scorned, I omens did defy. Whatever menaced, harassed, warned, I passed impetuous by. On sped my rainbow, fast as light. I flew as in a dream, for glorious rose upon my sight that child of shower and gleam. Still bright on clouds of suffering dim shines that soft, solemn joy, nor care I now how dense and grim disasters gather nigh. I care not in this moment sweet, though all I have rushed o'er should come on pinions strong and fleet, proclaiming vengeance sore. Though haughty hate should strike me down, right bar approach to me, and grinding might with furious frown swear endless enmity. My love has placed her little hand with noble faith in mine, and vowed that wedlock's sacred band our nature shall entwine. My love has sworn with sealing kiss with me to live, to die. I have at last my nameless bliss, as I loved am I. He rose and came towards me, and I saw his face all kindled, and his full falcon eye flashing, and tenderness and passion in every lineament. I quailed momentarily, then I rallied. Soft scene, daring demonstration I would not have, and I stood in peril of both. A weapon of defense must be prepared. I wetted my tongue. As he reached me, I asked with asperity whom he was going to marry now. That was a strange question to put by his darling Jane. Indeed, I considered it a very natural and necessary one. He had talked of his future wife dying with him. What did he mean by such an idea? I had no intention of dying with him. He might depend on that. Oh, all he longed, all he prayed for, was that I might live with him. Death was not for such as I. Indeed it was. I had as good a right to die when my time came as he had. But I should bide that time, and not be hurried away. Would I forgive him for the selfish idea, and prove my pardon by a reconciling kiss? No, I would rather be excused. Here I heard myself apostrophed as a hard little thing, and it was added, any other woman would have been melted to marrow at hearing such stanzas crooned in her praise. I assured him I was naturally hard, very flinty, and that he would often find me so, and that, moreover, I was determined to show him divers rugged points in my character before the ensuing 4 weeks elapsed. He should know fully what sort of a bargain he had made, while there was yet time to rescind it. Would I be quiet and talk rationally? I would be quiet if he liked, and as to talking rationally, I flattered myself I was doing that now. He fretted, pished, and pshawed. Very good, I thought. You may fume and fidget as you please, but this is the best plan to pursue with you, I'm certain. I like you more than I can say, but I'll not sink into a bathos of sentiment, and with this needle of repartee I'll keep you from the edge of the gulf too, and, moreover, maintain by its pungent aid that distance between you and myself most conducive to our real mutual advantage. From less to more, I worked him up to considerable irritation. Then, after he had retired, in dudgeon, quite to the other end of the room, I got up, and saying, I wish you good night, sir, in my natural and wonted respectful manner, I slipped out by the side door, and got away. The system thus entered on, I pursued during the whole season of probation, and with the best success. He was kept, to be sure, rather cross and crusty, but on the whole I could see he was excellently entertained, and that a lamb-like submission and turtle-dove sensibility, while fostering his despotism more, would have pleased his judgment, satisfied his common sense, and even suited his taste less. In other people's presence I was, as formerly, deferential and quiet, any other line of conduct being uncalled for. It was only in the evening conferences I thus thwarted and afflicted him. He continued to send for me punctually the moment the clock struck 7, though when I appeared before him now, I had no such honeyed terms as love and darling on his lips. The best words at my service were provoking puppet, malicious elf, sprite, changeling, etc. For caresses, too, I now got grimaces. For a pressure of the hand, a pinch on the arm. For a kiss on the cheek, a severe tweak of the ear. It was all right. At present, I decidedly preferred these fierce favors to anything more tender. Mrs. Fairfax, I saw, approved me. Her anxiety on my account vanished. Therefore, I was certain I did well. Meantime, Mr. Rochester affirmed I was wearing him to skin and bone, and threatened awful vengeance for my present conduct at some period fast coming. I laughed in my sleeve at his menaces. I can keep you in reasonable check now, I reflected, and I don't doubt to be able to do it hereafter. If one expedient loses its virtue, another must be devised. Yet, after all, my task was not an easy one. Often I would rather have pleased him than teased him. My future husband was becoming to me my whole world, and more than the world, almost my hope of heaven. He stood between me and every thought of religion, as an eclipse intervenes between man and the broad sun. I could not, in those days, see God for his creature, of whom I had made an idol. So that brings us to the end of the chapter for today. sounds like the month of waiting before the marriage is wrapping up, so probably next week we will have the marriage scene in which some crazy things happen. So I hope you continue to watch next week, and there'll be a lot of interesting scenes. So we'll see what happens next week. On Monday at noon I'll be back. Until then, I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time.